Hello World History 1 students, this is Mr. Everton and this is a video about the Black Death. Please have your High Middle Ages notes packet out and we'll get started trying to answer this question. How did the Black Death change Europe? So, the Black Death is the name that's given to a disease that hit Europe in about the middle of the 14th century, so 1347 to 1350, thereabouts. And it killed a lot of people, which led to, it decimated the population, is another way of saying that. Decimated just means it drastically reduced the population. And usually when you hear people talk about the Black Death, they're talking about Europe, but the Black Death actually originated in East Asia. So the Black Death began in China, and actually, many historians believe helped to end the Yuan dynasty in China. The government that was running China at the time weakened that dynasty and caused it to end. And it spread through trade routes across Asia. At that time, Asia was being controlled by the Mongols, and they allowed a lot of trade to take place along the old Silk Road trade routes. And it's important to know that when trade happens, it's not just that, you know, like we think of trade and we know that it drives economic growth. It helps people to earn money. We know that it helps to spread ideas. It helps to spread culture. It helps to spread technological innovations, but it can also spread disease. And when you're interconnected, when your region is connected to other regions in other parts of the world, it means that a catastrophe in that part of the world can also affect you. So the Black Death is certainly an example of how that happened, how a disease in China was able to affect the Middle East, North Africa, and certainly Europe. So the Black Death originated in East Asia. It decimated the population there, and then it spread through trade on ships like the ones that you see in the picture here to the Middle East, to Europe, and it decimated the population there. It ended up having a much smaller population in the places where the Black Death hit. This is just an interesting side note. We believe that the Mongols, we have accounts that describe the Mongols launching corpses of people who died from the plague over the walls of buildings that they were laying siege to as a way to infect the people inside the city with the plague. I keep calling the Black Death the plague, which, you know, in some historical circles is a no-no. You're not supposed to say, you're supposed to say either the Black Death or the bubonic plague. Historians for a long time debated whether the Black Death was actually this disease that is called the bubonic plague. And recent studies of DNA have led many historians to believe that, yes, the Black Death was actually this disease called the bubonic plague, which is caused by the bacteria that you see pictured here called Yersinia pestis, is like the Latin name for this bacteria. And Yersinia pestis is it's a bacteria that lives inside of fleas. And so the theory is here that, you know, you have your farmer, he's minding his own business, he's planting his crops, just a farming minding my own business. And then a ship shows up, a ship perhaps from China, shows up in the harbor of the local city, and there are rats that have stowed away in the holds of that ship. You know, most ships have rats that live in them. They're not necessarily very clean places, so they're covered. All these rats that are living in the hold of the ship, and when the ship docks, the rats leave the ship, and on the rats are fleas, and these fleas are what is carrying the bacteria Yersinia pestis, and so the rat dies, and the fleas jump off, and they jump onto the farmer, and then the farmer dies. Sorry, farmer. So we believe, the general theory goes that the Black Death was spread by fleas that lived on rats, that the rats died, the fleas jumped on people, and that's when the people got sick. And then from there, people got sick and they spread it to each other. Here is a map of the spread of the Black Death in Europe. You can see from this map that the darkest parts on the map the brown spots received like it's a present, but were struck by the bubonic plague in 1347. And then the orange places on the map Black Death reached there in about 1348. So it reached Constantinople and the southern part of France first, and then it It hit Italy soon after, which makes sense because Italy had a lot of port cities. They were doing a lot of trade. And then it moved north through the rest of Europe. Later, it would hit London. Later still, it would hit Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, like northern Eastern Europe. When the Black Death infected somebody, it would cause a swelling about the size of like a golf ball or an egg in their lymph nodes. And these swellings were called buboes. And here's an illustration that somebody at the time made of buboes on people. Buboes, once you started to have buboes, other symptoms included, sometimes there's descriptions of coughing up blood. There's descriptions of red rashes. There's description of gangrene, limbs rotting and starting to fall off. And usually when somebody was infected with the Black Death, they would die within 2 to 7 days. It was incredibly infectious. It spread very quickly. And we believe that it killed somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all Europeans who were living in that time. It's very easy for me to sit here and say 1/3 to 1/2 of all Europeans. But imagine if a disease hit the United States and killed 1/3 to 1/2 of all the people living here. It would feel like the world was ending. I mean, wouldn't it? If half the people that you know were suddenly dead from this disease and you didn't know if you were going to get it, it's a very scary, very traumatic thing. And it left a huge impact on Europe when this happened. Here is a description from a man named Giovanni Boccaccio, who wrote, this is a novel called The Decameron, but he describes the plague in his novel. The scourge had implanted so great a terror in the hearts of men and women that brothers abandoned brothers, wives deserted their husbands, fathers and mothers refused to nurse and assist their own children. Because the disease was so infectious, it spread so easily from person to person. If somebody you knew had it, you knew that they were going to die, and you got to a certain point where you realized, like, if I try to help this person, even though I love them, there's nothing I can do for them, and all I'm going to do by helping them is cause myself to get sick and die too. So it's very traumatic. But at the same time, then you're like abandoning your children or your brother or your wife to death and dying alone. So the Black Death really had a huge impact on European society, and it really disrupted European society. This is a diagram, as I'm sure you know, of the feudal system. And the feudal system is really heavily reliant, excuse me, let me go back for a second, on the labor of the peasants or serfs. And so what happens during the Black Death, many peasants or serfs were killed by this disease. And so there was a labor shortage. So the feudal system, which is relying on all this hard work from the peasants who grow all the food, suddenly they don't have those peasants, or they don't have enough of them to grow the food that people need to eat. And so that leads to famine. Famine, if you don't know what that word means, it just means widespread hunger and starvation. There's not enough food to eat. So people who didn't die from the Black Death, perhaps they did die from not having enough food, not getting their body's basic needs met. This did mean, however, the labor shortage did mean that if you survived the Black Death and you survived the famine, that there were way fewer people who were working, and so there was more demand for your work. And so you could ask for more money, and you could ask for better circumstances in your life. You could perhaps leave the manor where you'd been living. You could go to a town and find a job there, or you could go to a different farm and you could work there. It really opened up opportunities for the people who didn't die. So that helped also to weaken the feudal system. The feudal system depended on people who were peasants being stuck in one place, and now those people suddenly feel like they have options and they can leave. So the Black Death definitely disrupted the feudal system. A couple of just interesting side notes I want to throw out there. This is a picture of a doctor who is treating plague victims, and he's wearing a mask with a beak on it, and inside that beak are a bunch of herbs. People in the Middle Ages didn't really understand what was going on with the Black Death, but they did think that it spread through the air, and they thought it had something to do with like bad smells. So they thought that if you could smell, if you were smelling flowers and perfumes and like warding off all the bad smells, that it would keep you from getting sick. And something you may already know if you've learned anything about the Black Death before, is that the old nursery rhyme, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, is referencing the Black Death. So ring around the rosy is referring to the rash that people have when they're infected with the Black Death. A pocket full of posies is talking about the idea that like the smell of flowers can help to like was believed to help ward off illness. And ashes, ashes, we all fall down means like we all die. So it's actually a very disturbing children's rhyme. Other ways that the Black Death disrupted society. It disrupted trade. It hit the cities really hard because that's where the points of trade were. That's where most of the trading happened. And because it was spread through trade, it killed a lot of people in these cities, people who are living close together, who are, it's highly infectious. It's spreading really quickly there. So it disrupted trade. It led to an increase in anti-Semitism. People viewed Jewish people as outsiders, as an other, someone who wasn't Christian, who was, and they were very easy to blame. A lot of people remember the Middle Ages was an age of faith. It was an age where Europeans were very, very into Christianity, where they were very devout believers in Christianity, and they believed that the Black Death was a punishment from God. And some people believed that it was a punishment for tolerance of Jewish people, and so they responded by being incredibly intolerant of Jewish people. Here you can see a picture of Jewish people being burned. And still other groups of people, Christians, who believed that the plague was a punishment from God, set about whipping themselves. These were called flagellants. They would parade through towns, like walk through towns in groups, whipping their bare backs with whips, drawing out blood as a way to show penance, as a way to say, like, God, I'm going to punish myself now. Like, I'm really sorry. Whatever it is that happened to cause you to send this disease to kill all these people, please take it away because I'm showing you how sorry I am. All of this helped to really weaken the Catholic Church. People wanted to understand what the Black Death was doing. They wanted to understand why it was there. They wanted to understand why God had sent it to punish them. And in many cases, you found that like nuns and priests, the Catholic clergy, were not able to answer those questions. And a lot of times you found that nuns and priests who were trying to help people who were suffering from the Black Death ended up getting sick and dying themselves. So the fact that the Catholic Church wasn't able to give people answers contributed to a weakening, many historians think, of the Catholic Church as an institution in Europe. So to summarize today, let me explain this picture. Because the Catholic Church was weakened, you also had a lot of people who believed that, there's no point in worrying about church, so we're just going to like go out and eat and drink and have a good time and, just like live life to the fullest now. And so that was another example of people turning away from the church because the Black Death made life seem very short. And so, you only live once. So to summarize, the Black Death originated in East Asia. It spread to Europe through trade. It started off in the south around Italy and moved up gradually to the north into England and other parts of Europe. It decreased the population significantly, maybe by as much as 50%, and it helped to weaken the institutions in Europe that were holding society together, institutions like feudalism and the Catholic Church. Thanks very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.